Hi, Elaine here. Today we're talking Pride and Prejudice, not the Vices, but the novel by Jane Austen. In 2025, the story had a few significant anniversaries. The 1995 BBC miniseries starring Jennifer Isle and Colin Firth is celebrating 30 years since its debut this fall. The 2005 film starring Keira Knightley and Matthew Macfadyen came back to theaters this past spring to celebrate its 20th year. Plus, this upcoming winter marks 250 years since Jane Austen's birth. Austen was in her late 30s when the book was published in 1813. It was her second novel after Sense and Sensibility, which was published in 1811, and she died 4 years later. Despite the time elapsed since Austen wrote the book and it was published, the novel seems to have remained part of our cultural narrative. Today, we sit down and talk Austen. Again, I'm Elaine.
And I'm Carlin.
Welcome back to our podcast, Related. So, Carlin, what was your first memory of Pride and Prejudice? Do you even remember? Okay. I couldn't remember mine.
I couldn't remember. I do remember reading it. And I was trying to remember whether I read it. I think I read it in the context of school, but I couldn't remember if it was something that I read. I remember taking a class in high school, for example, around modern British literature, which I may have read it there, but I'm also having this vague sense that I might have read it as part of summer reading. Like it was a summer reading book that I read. I don't remember when, but there's something about like somewhere between the years of like 8th grade and 10th grade, I think is when I read it. And I will say I remember being so enraptured by it. Like it's one of those books that I think back to books that you were sort of forced to read in school or growing up. And it was one of the books that I really, really enjoyed and loved.
Yes.
What about you?
I have the same memory. It's like a school related memory.
Yeah.
But I don't remember having like discussions
like
about
papers or anything. Yeah.
Right.
Agreed. Yeah.
So I also think that it might have been summer reading.
Yeah.
And I also remember really, really enjoying it and really falling in love with it. I think there was a time there when I made a point to read it every year.
Really?
Yes. It was like, you know how I was a fan of romance novels back in the day. It was like the original romance novel.
Yes. Agreed. Agreed. It's interesting. It is really one of the books that I remember like really reading. The other one I remember, different author, is Jane Eyre, which to me sort of falls in like a little bit of a similar world in the sense of sort of
the time,
the feminist, but like kind of not, I don't know, the sort of the romance component, the Mr. Darcy and Mr. Rochester figures, sort of this like brooding gentlemen.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that I remember about reading both of those books and Pride and Prejudice in particular was this sense of, even though it was a very different time and in some ways a different language, I found the story engaging and relatable in a way that some of the stuff we read in high school that was of another time didn't always land for me. Like I don't remember reading Dickens, for example, and thinking like, ooh, I want to like reread this over again, or like I see myself in these characters, or I'm swept away by this story. But Pride and Prejudice, I definitely did.
Yeah. And I think I agree with that. Jane Eyre, Pride and Prejudice, like a timelessness.
Yes. Yeah.
And I actually wonder if that's because both of them were written by women, and a lot of the books that we were reading in high school were not written by women. And I wonder if there was like a relatability to those authors when we read them, that there was a connection there that we did not have with like most of the assigned reading.
Wait, going on a tangent here, because I was just listening, and we can certainly link this for folks in the description, but I was just listening to The Daily is doing this series right now. The New York Times, The Daily is doing this series right now with sort of like Sunday culture episodes on their podcast. And they did a story this past Sunday, aka yesterday, on books that we read growing up.
Ah,
And yeah, and it was really interesting because some of the books I remembered, well, actually a lot of the books they referenced were remembered, but some of them I didn't. But anyway, what it's bringing up for me was the fact that a lot of the authors that they were talking about, especially for that sort of like middle school, high school age, were written by men. It was like F. Scott
yes.
Fitzgerald, The Great Gatsby, Catcher in the Rye, J.D.
Yes.
Salinger. So anyway, what you're saying right now about the women piece, I'm like trying to rack my brain around who the other female authors were that we were reading. Like I'm like, okay, we read Shakespeare, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do remember reading like House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. She's a
I don't
woman.
remember that. I don't remember that.
Mm, yeah.
I actually I'm trying to think of some other ones now, and it was like Jane Eyre, Pride and Prejudice. I like when I got into like higher level English,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
11th or 12th grade, we read like Toni Morrison.
Yes. Yes.
Um and I've mentioned before on this podcast Kindred, and I think that
Yes.
was assigned reading at some point. But like 4 books?
Yeah. Yeah. And then a whole lot of like quote classics, like especially the American classics, which I think
Yeah.
tend to be written by men
And white men.
and white men. Yeah.
Which Jane Austen was also white, but I think given the time when she was writing, there were a lot of privileges that were not afforded to white women. So
Yeah.
there were also she also had like perspectives on socioeconomic status,
Yep.
and there's like a complicated history with her family and
Yep.
slavery, which is
Yep.
like she was dealing with these issues.
Yeah. Yeah. It is really interesting. I'm also now wondering, as an aside, I'm so curious to look at what the sort of middle and high school reading lists look like
Looks like
now.
now. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's been what, 20 years?
Mhm. Yeah.
I don't know, because there is such like a dependence on those classics that you mentioned. Like they're
It
classics for a reason, is that generations
yeah.
have been taught them.
It's true. But I do think using the house on Mango Street as an example, that was a more modern introduction into the, I don't know,
Yes.
education catalog, for example. And so I'm curious if there have been others since.
Yes. And
Yeah.
I wonder if now, if Pride and Prejudice or other Jane Austen novels, like we mentioned that it was summer reading for us, I
Yeah.
wonder if it now has more of a focus. I wonder if they now discuss
Yeah.
it, because I think that there's enough there to have discussions.
Totally. And it's because I feel like Jane Austen, more so, like I think of Jane Austen in culture more than I do of J.D. Salinger in culture, for
Yes.
example. Like I feel like people talk about Gatsby and Fitzgerald a lot, but I
More
actually
than enough.
more than enough. But I think Austen, at least for me, even more than like Dickens, right,
Yeah.
is I think has had a more enduring presence in culture, especially for women.
Yes. I mentioned in the intro the 1995
Ugh,
BBC miniseries,
so
which
good.
love, and the
So good.
2005 film.
Less loved for me, but yeah.
Also less love for me, but
Yeah.
also have rewatched it quite a bit in the last 20 years. When I want that Pride and Prejudice hit, but I want it quick,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
go to that
It's
film.
so funny. I actually go if I want a quick hit of that, and it's maybe also if I want a quick hit of Colin Firth, I'll do Bridget Jones's Diary, actually.
Yes, which is
Yeah.
also based on the story
On
of Pride and
Yep.
Prejudice.
Yep.
Pride and
Yep.
Prejudice. But talking about connecting that to what you were saying, do you think that those films, movies, series have come out because of our enduring connection to Jane Austen?
I don't know. Well, it's interesting because it's like, is it a connection to Jane Austen or is it just the magic of the story or her stories?
Definitely her stories, because
Yeah.
we have the Emma films, we have Sandition, we have
Yeah. Yeah.
all of her works have
Yeah.
been
I think it's pronounced Sanditon. Sanditon?
Sanditon?
I think so. I think
Sanditon?
so. I don't know.
It's
But
it's not a work that I've read,
yeah,
actually.
it's interesting because I actually feel more of an attachment to the stories and the output than I do the author for whatever reason. Like, I don't, there are a couple movies and shows like Becoming Jane Austen, right, that talk a little bit more about the author too.
Mm.
I think like when I think about Pride and Prejudice, to me, it's really about the story. Which I don't know. I don't know why I'm making that distinction, but for me, it's, I don't know. Maybe I guess it is inherently a pull, therefore, towards Jane Austen because it's her work of art. But yeah, the story I think is just such a good. It's just such a good story,
Yeah.
honestly.
I
And
would argue that her story, she puts a lot of herself in her stories.
yes, yes, fair,
Like, I
yes,
think, like, she's grappling with people like her,
yeah,
and people in situations like the situations she found herself. So I
yeah,
also was more attracted to the stories she's telling because it's more of a first person perspective of who she is.
yeah,
So anyway, just
yeah.
agreeing with you.
No, totally. I honestly, for me, like it really did start with the Colin Firth adaptation. I think that really opened up my eyes to more of the sort of film visual interpretation of Jane Austen's novels. And I will say, I don't know that there is a woman that I know who has not seen
Oh
that
yeah.
BBC series, right? And who also doesn't like regularly rewatch that
Yes.
series, which is
Yes.
like kind of incredible, right? Like it's
Yeah.
really a tenet of, I don't know, maybe not everyone, but at least within our like liberal-esque like world. Yeah, everyone's really seen it and also really loved it too.
which is which is actually remarkable because it came out when you were what, 7?
Yes.
And it came
Yes.
out when I was 5. So we were we were not watching it when it
Yeah,
first came out.
I'm also now trying to remember if I watched it before. Like, I remember watching it, and I remember mom checking it out from the library in that, like, 6-part
DVD series,
DVD
yeah.
series, yeah. We might have even had a, like, VHS version the first time,
We
to
might
be
have.
honest, yeah,
I
and
I kind of vaguely remember her suggesting it after I had read the
read
book.
it? Okay, okay.
Like, she didn't wanna ruin the book reading
Yeah,
experience, but
yeah.
once that was completed, she was like, "Oh, there's also this mini series you
Yeah,
can
and
watch."
I'm pretty sure, like, I don't remember I do not remember watching it as a 7-year-old, for example, but I do remember
No.
watching it as, like, a teenager.
Yes.
Um,
Did mom
so
introduce you to it as well, or was it something you kind of found organically on your
I no,
own?
no, I'm pretty sure I can't imagine there's a world where we didn't watch it for the first time together. I'm pretty sure, and mom also loves that
Yeah.
content too, so I'm pretty sure she rented it from the library and we, like, watched it.
I wonder if I watched it before I had read the book, but that's not what my memory is.
Hmm, who knows?
Interesting.
Who knows?
So when did
But
you see, like, the 2005 film?
I think I saw the 2005 film when it came out. And
Okay.
honestly, I just have, frankly, for me, it's all about Colin Firth as Mr. Darcy. And
Yes.
maybe that's also why the Bridget Jones version was so much more resonant for me than the Keira Knightley, Matthew McFadyen version, was that I just like Colin Firth is my Mr. Darcy forever and always. And so, yeah, yeah. I don't know, it was just such a I'm just, like, thinking about why the story is so compelling as well too, like, there's obviously some tension, there's some feminism, there's,
Yes.
like, what does it mean to have equality in a marriage or a partnership or, equality for what it could have looked like in the 1800s, but still
Yes.
actually feels equal reading it back now for a woman to feel like seen and appreciated for who she is and how she acts. And I just don't the dynamic between those two characters, like Elizabeth is so beloved. Like, there's so much of myself that I'm able to see in her. And then Mr. Darcy is just like really hot, you know? And then again, visually in the BBC version, I just feel like Jennifer Isle and Colin Firth's chemistry was just
yes.
so good. So
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. I also feel like, I mean, Colin Firth definitely personified this, but I think the Mr. Darcy in the book is also kind of like an ideal feminist
Yeah, totally.
partner.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and
um
he
like
also beats to his own drum
yes,
too, right?
yes,
Yeah.
but doesn't try, like, yes, is critical of like the people around her, but
Yeah.
doesn't try to change her.
Yeah.
And also when she is like, I'm not interested in you, he backs
Yep.
off.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So they're very much their own two people who kind of find their way to each other, but are respectful of each other in that capacity. Not
Yeah.
saying that he is perfect, because he definitely has his flaws as
He
well.
does. But he's also good, right? Like, he's valued. There's this whole premise that he has been the wrongdoer because there's sort of this rumor around him about this dynamic that he has with this other guy that Elizabeth ultimately is sort of interested in. And then it turns out, spoiler alert, that those were all lies, and it was actually Mr. Darcy who's sort of been the like really thoughtful and considerate one.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. It's also just making me think through. I was having a conversation with a friend the other day around like what makes a good story.
Mm.
And so now as we're talking about this, I think it's partly the characters, it's the time. I think there's for me at least, thinking about the fact that this novel was set in the 1800s, you have to have both a simultaneous sort of like human truth relatability, which I think Pride and Prejudice certainly does. I think, especially for women, I don't want to be super biased here, but I do think there is a draw more naturally for women to really love Pride and Prejudice more than men.
Yeah.
But then there's also at the same time a little bit of escapism into this like time and place that's also so foreign to us
Right.
too. Which I also, one of the articles you sent said that a lot of the cultural adaptations are actually more popular in the US than they are in the UK. And
Oh, interesting.
and this reason wasn't listed, but I actually wonder if there's like, I actively seek out British period dramas often,
Mhm.
like the Downton Abbeys, the North and Souths. Like, I just love them. And
Yeah.
I'm, as we're talking about this, I'm like, I'm not sure why that is, but I
Yeah.
do.
So this is actually why I like fantasy novels, is
Yeah.
because I think the best way to actually deal with issues in the present is to remove yourself from this world.
Mm,
It's easier to examine things from the outside than it is
yeah.
to live them or experience them
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
So I can see how that, while it was Jane Austen's reality, it's
Yeah.
not our reality.
Naughty. Yeah.
So using that framework to examine our own lives is
Mm-hmm.
is like a comforting distance.
Totally. Totally. Yeah, I love them. And they need to have a sense of place, but they also need to have a romance. I think
Yeah.
that's definitely a question that has been posed, is like, was Jane Austen a romance author? I think the answer is no, but like,
I think she was. I think romance gets this bad rap where it's like, if she was a romance novel, then she couldn't have been a serious author.
okay, maybe that's where I'm hesitant to define her as such, because it like puts it into, I'm like, no, this is like highbrow literature, you
It
know?
is, but it's
Yeah.
also
No,
romance.
totally. Totally.
I just think that romance partnership, the way we deal with a potential partner,
Yeah.
is like such, it's like too interesting of a subject to be ignored
Yeah.
or dismissed. And I think
Yeah.
it has been in the past because it's been like a woman's domain. It's what interests women.
Yeah.
But I don't think it actually makes it any less important to
Yeah.
to examine from an artist's perspective.
Yeah.
In fact, I totally forgot about this, but I actually wrote a paper in law school about Pride and Prejudice.
Really? What was
Yeah,
the
so
thesis?
so I was in a negotiating class,
Yeah,
and I was basically like Elizabeth and Darcy's relationship and their proposal is basically a negotiation.
totally. Yeah.
And I basically broke down their
Wait, I
relationship
love
as
that.
like a negotiating.
Wait, I would
Like
love that. I would have loved to be your professor. What a like fresh law
I
school
did I
paper.
did not get a good grade on that paper. I think probably because it was like she's being silly
Yeah.
when I was like completely
Really serious.
serious.
Yeah. I think what I also love about Pride and Prejudice, to be honest, is that at the end, Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth end up together, right?
Yes.
Like, and I think
Yes.
I think that's one thing that we seek out from those kinds of stories, or at least I do, when I think about like the Emmas, the Sense and Sensibilities, is like the protagonist does end up with the like brooding male often,
Yeah.
right? Or the brooding
Yeah.
kind male, or the brooding but like ultimately a softy
Yeah,
male.
I was gonna say brooding is not the word I'd use, like misunderstood.
Misunderstood. Yes, that's better. That's better. Yes, yes. And so I think that's interesting too, right? Is that there are these quote like happy endings at the end of all of her stories, which just like going back to this novel thing is like I think when we see happy endings in romance, these like in modern times, it's again put into these categories of like rom-com or like pure romance. There's a distinction, right? Because I think there's romance novels, which are like the Danielle Steels, right? Which
Right.
are they're like very explicitly romance. There are, you know, throbbing manhoods and things like that in there. And they tend to be like period pieces, right? Like
Right.
set in a time. And then there's like what I think it's categorized as chick lit, which is essentially romance stories with a happy ending that happen in more like modern time
Right.
too. And I guess what I'm just trying to think through is like I'm having a hard time coming up with a story in recent times that I've read that is like a modern romance with a happy ending that doesn't fall in those two categories.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And she kind of was between them, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and I'm like, is it because it's a classic, right? Is
Right.
it just because like what would if Jane Austen wrote that book today, like
Mhm.
set in modern times, which is essentially what Bridget Jones's Diary is, but Bridget Jones's Diary is chick lit,
Yeah.
right? Is like,
Yeah.
do you see what I'm saying? Is
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I do I do think the difference between Bridget Jones's Diary
Yes,
and it is a level of competence with the written word.
yes. Yes.
Like
Yes.
I think no disrespect to the author of Bridget Jones's Diary, but I remember trying to read the book after having watched the movie and having the toughest time reading it,
Yeah.
which could have been my own experience with that
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
But there was a level of just proficiency with
Yeah.
writing that Jane Austen just had a way.
Oh, she totally did. Yeah, I guess I'm just and I don't want to take us much further down this path because it's definitely a tangent. Is I just if Jane Austen were to write her book in modern times as a modern woman with like the same characters and the same story, but obviously, you know, a different sense of place because it would be modern, I'd just be curious how people would respond to it and categorize it. Because I
Yeah.
do think there's something about the fact that she wrote the story in the 1800s and it's a story that's sort of like grown with time that is part I mean that's what makes a classic
Yeah.
but yeah.
So I definitely have this connection with Pride and Prejudice that I don't have with Jane Austen's other works. Are you
I
the
agree.
same or
I agree. You know, I don't even know if I've read her other books. I know I've seen the film and cultural adaptions of like anything that has basically been like culturalized. Like I've seen the film versions of multiple of like multiple Emmas, multiple Sense and Sensibilities, multiple Mansfield Parks.
Yeah.
I've seen Sanditon. I know you haven't, but I really loved it. Um, and yeah, I've seen most of the modern Pride and Prejudices. I know there are some that were made like earlier in the 1900s that I have not watched, and I'm not sure I really have interest in watching.
Is there something about the Pride and Prejudice story that you think is more universal than her other stories?
I don't know. There is something just about like the characters and the way the plot unfolds in Pride and Prejudice that is a really good mix of like chemistry, tension, and like, yeah, you're like, who is this Mr. Darcy? You know?
Yeah.
While as in the others, sometimes you get distracted by the side plots and the side characters in a way that I don't, even though there is a lot of side stuff happening in Pride and Prejudice, it's still like the story between Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy is still like the driving force.
Yeah.
It's interesting, like, I loved Clueless, like, so much, which is a modern like, a loose but modern interpretation of Emma, more than I like sort of the period visual interpretations of Emma.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why.
Yeah, I'm also not a fan of the modern interpretation, the
Mhm.
modern but time period
It
accurate
Yeah.
versions of Emma. It just did
Yeah.
not call to me.
It didn't call to me. So yeah, I don't know. Like, I think I mentioned Jane Eyre before. Like, when I think of other stories that I return to occasionally of that general time, it's actually like Jane Eyre more so than it is other Austen stories.
So I have to
Yeah,
ask, because
yeah,
I was not a Jane Eyre fan,
yeah.
what pulls you to Jane Eyre?
I think it's actually a similar dynamic. Like, I like the just sort of like weird mystery component of
Yeah.
this sort of kind of gloomy house with this mystery and this like woman like ultimately locked upstairs, which
Yeah.
um yeah, and like the fire, and I don't know, there's something, it's interesting when I visualize Pride and Prejudice, it's actually very like light and bright, and I think of like flowers and sun. And when I
And
think of Jane
and
Eyre,
county
it's
balls.
exactly, when I think of Jane Eyre, it's actually like darker and
Yeah.
gloomier and like whatnot. But the story, I think, also between Jane Eyre and Mr. Rochester, even though I don't like him as much as Mr. Darcy, I just remember being really captivated the first time I read the book. And
Mm.
then watching a couple of the different film adaptations and also really enjoying them. Not in the same way that I did Pride and Prejudice, but yeah, but enjoying that more than I enjoy the story of Emma and Sense and Sensibility. I don't know. I can't really put my finger on it. It's just it's gut instinct and maybe how they made me feel.
Yeah. It's interesting that kind of the draw for both of those books is actually, like, the male lead.
It
Um,
totally is. Well, and it's like this dynamic between, and I will say the Jane Eyre one is like interesting, right? Because it's also there's a power dynamic there too,
yeah.
because he's her employer, he's a lot older.
Well, there's
Um,
also in Pride and Prejudice, he's a wealthy man,
yes,
she's
yes. Right,
not.
right,
So, I
right.
think there are interesting power dynamic, maybe not the same extent, but there's also
Yeah.
power dynamics in Pride and
Yes.
Prejudice.
So I think there is maybe like a romantic part of me that plays into this story of like the unseen woman is seen by the powerful man, which like I'm not really proud to say out loud, but I do think women are sometimes raised that way. I do think there is a cultural, I don't know. I know we talked about Pride and Prejudice as sort of being like the equal partnership, but I do think at the end of the day, like she does choose him, but he also very much chooses her.
Yeah.
And I think in Jane Eyre, he chooses her too. And I think there is something there that I maybe not proud of like being part of that cultural narrative, but I can't deny that that might be part of the draw for
Well,
me.
I think there is something alluring about someone with privilege and power
Yeah.
recognizing your
Yeah.
inherent
Right.
like power or value
Yeah.
in in society when so much is placed on position and
Yeah.
occupation,
Yep.
and having someone who embodies like the traditional values
Yeah.
kind of recognizing you, I think
Yeah.
is a potent theme.
Yeah. I think one thing also, just to say this is like, because I know you really love K dramas, as do I, and
Mm.
I'm bringing this up because I think what's one really interesting thing about what's like so special about how enduring Pride and Prejudice is, and Jane Eyre, but like just using Pride and Prejudice in all of Austen's stories is like there's very little sex, right? Like there's no sex
Mm.
actually.
Right.
Um
Can
right?
you
It
imagine?
I can't. I can't. Then it would definitely be in like romance novel territory.
Yeah.
But it's like just the story and the romance. And I actually think that's one reason I'm drawn to K-dramas, like K-drama romances
Yeah.
is is like the story is so enduring that like you get really pulled into the feelings and the dynamic and the emotional chemistry without needing the other stuff.
Yeah. I think that's right. I think oftentimes in current literature, sex is used, and I don't want to sound like a prude, but like
Yeah.
sex is used as like a shortcut for establishing intimacy
Yeah.
when you have to build intimacy. Like Jane Austen, it was not acceptable to be writing about
Yeah. Yep.
sex.
Yep.
So she doesn't have
Totally.
that crutch to rely on. Oh, they fell into bed together and
Yep.
now they're
Yeah.
intimate. It's
Yep.
like you actually have to show the actual intimacy.
Yep. Yeah. Hmm.
And I think that's harder to do.
It's definitely harder to do because I think it requires more like character development and I think probably better writing.
Yeah.
Well, now I have to go watch. I haven't watched the BBC version of this year. I think I need to go back and watch it. I don't know if I'm going to
I
watch
know.
the Keira Knightley version for its 20th anniversary. I don't know why. I just like that one. I just didn't take that one. That one didn't take to me the way that the other one did, but I'm definitely going to rewatch the BBC.
I also wonder if part of what we're talking about is like the development of intimacy that just like can't really happen in an hour and a
Hour and a
half
half.
film.
Yeah.
It's funny because there's a different ending with the American and British versions of that film. So in
Mm.
the American version, there's a scene with Darcy and Elizabeth Bennet on like the balcony of Pemberley.
Yep.
And it's like the night of their wedding, which is like talking
Yeah.
about the sex implications.
Yeah.
And so it's like the American version had to have that like
That
very clear sexual aspect.
interesting. Yeah.
But I think it's right. I think there's something about the 6-hour miniseries which
Oh, you're just
allows
like so invested by the end
oh
and yet somehow so sad when you get to the last DVD or episode and you're like, "No, I don't want this to be over."
what I love about Pride and Prejudice is that like you said, it's been consumed by so many people that it's like
Yeah.
it's a language all on its own. You can make references to
Totally.
it without having to explain yourself.
Totally. 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 Yeah, there are very few stories where you could be like, "And Lydia," and like,
Yeah.
Caroline Bingley. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And not even Shakespeare. It's like if I
I
referenced a
know.
character in Shakespeare, people would be like, remind me, which is like
Totally,
totally
unless it's like
legit.
Romeo and Juliet.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah. No, totally. Yeah, it's, she really built a world for us. It's pretty
Yeah.
special.
What I found when I was researching for this episode was so fascinating was that she was like your age when
I
she
know, late
published.
30s. I
Yeah.
know,
And then she
I know.
died like early 40s. Like imagine
Yeah,
what we could have gotten
I know,
if she hadn't
I
passed
know.
away.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed our conversation today, we look forward to sharing more with you.
Follow us now so that when our next episode premieres, you can be sure not to miss it. You can find us wherever you listen to your podcasts.
See you next time, everyone.
So I don't want to. We need to wrap up this conversation, but I have to talk really briefly about the character of Lydia, which is there's like so many complicated feelings about Lydia that I have, because I think she was trapped in time in a way that if we had a Lydia now, there would not be the same kind of judgment against her. She was a young girl navigating the world. But when I read Pride and Prejudice, I have such a disdain for the character, which I feel complicated and conflicted about.
Totally. I also, admittedly, I haven't reread the book in a very long time. But when watching the BBC version, Lydia and then also like Mrs. Bennet, their
Yes.
mom, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, can we all just take a minute and maybe
And
shut
even
up?
Mary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, oh my God. Totally. Yeah. I think you have a point that she, as like a character and with like her behaviors, probably would have had a different outcome in a different time.